So let me just flip the question the other way, Gavin and Jerry Brown and Nancy Pelosi. What did you think was going to happen when over the last 25 years you let in 10 million people into California that were undocumented? Where were they going to live? Where were they going to get medical care? Where were they going to go to school? How was it going to affect other people? How were they going to drive when they didn't know anything about American traffic law? Where were they going to get and did any of that affect you? And the answer is no, it didn't affect you. It affected other people, poor people, middle-class people. So that's why you did it. You felt good about it, but you never lived among the people you so-called championed.
Hello, ladies. Hello, gentlemen. Welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. We are recording on Sunday the 3rd, and this episode is up on Thursday the 7th. Victor, I am silently praying to whoever the patron saint of the internet is to keep my connection going through this
His name's
show.
Elon Musk, Saint Elon.
Saint Elon of Musk. Well, he's very pro-life. We know that. He's trying to repopulate the world. Victor is the Martin. Well, I don't know if the hands involved. Victor is the Martin and Healy Anderson Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution and a man with a website, The Blade of Perseus, victorhanson.com. I'll get this over with now. You should subscribe. $65 a year or $6.50 a month. And when you do that, when you subscribe, you will get Victor's twice a week, the exclusive pieces he writes for The Blade of Perseus, and one exclusive video a week. And in total over the year, it's about 2 books worth of Victor's wisdom. So go there, subscribe. Now, we've got a lot of ladies to talk about on today's podcast, Victor, and we'll begin with some great action, I think, maybe you'll think differently, by Brooke Rollins, who's the Secretary of Agriculture. We have some following that. We have 2 Wall Street Journal essays, op-eds from this past weekend, one by Peggy Noonan on ICE, one by Kim Strassel on climate and the right, and Kamala Harris, and Sydney Sweeney, the lady of infamy and jeans. And we'll get to all of this when we come back from these important messages. We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor, let's get right into it. And there is this terrific website I've come across recently, I've mentioned on a couple of podcasts, called UNWON, UNWON, and it talks a lot about agriculture issues, land issues out west, water, etc. And here's a piece where they're doing some good reporting on Brooke Rollins, the Secretary of Agriculture. Rollins announces plan to decentralize and streamline USDA. No more than 2,000 USDA employees will remain in the nation's capital, with 2,600 relocating to 5 regional hubs: North Carolina, Missouri, Indiana, Colorado, Utah, as well as 2 administrative support sites in New Mexico, Minnesota. Employees will be required to live within 50 miles of their assigned offices. By the way, the reverse, moving people out of D.C. may actually save money because they get a bump up when they live in high-cost areas. Brooke Rollins is a terrific conservative, Victor. She used to run the Texas Public Policy Institute. And I think you'd like this because you're a person in past podcasts, many past podcasts, you've talked about, let's get these folks out of DC.
We have.
What are your thoughts?
And Kash Patel has promised to do the same thing with the FBI. There's 2 or 3 problems when you have that bi-coastal elite and you have these power marriages. They're on both sides, Republican and Democrat, but when you have the president of CBS is the brother of Ben Rhodes during the how can he be disinterested? Or when you see these power couples, one woman is an anchor woman, one is a senior policy analyst for an, how can she report on what her husband's administration is doing? So it's just too incestuous. That's one problem. The other problem is that Washington as a group, as a population, votes about 70% Democrat. And yet some of these institutions represent mostly conservative people, energy, the people in the oil industry, coal industry, nuclear industry, but especially agriculture. So you have decisions made on these rural people. All of us are kind of relics from a bygone era, and yet their futures are being determined by people who are urban, living in Washington, D.C., that are far left, who have no idea where their food's coming. So I can tell you that a person in Visalia, California, that does not live on a farm, or a person in maybe still in Fresno or Bakersfield, they know about the farm life because it's the source of income for their communities, and they're more sensitive to it. I can remember right around Labor Day every year, Channel 30 used to give us the raisin report, whether it was going to rain on open raisin trays that night. So people were all concerned about it, but it doesn't work when you have a bunch of faceless left-wing bureaucrats that are trying to adjudicate what it's like to farm in North Dakota or something. So it's good. They should do that with more and more of these institutions, break them up. And then if the anchor woman at CNN wants to marry the Obama type of national security advisor or something, then let them move to North Dakota and maybe they can commute. But that idea they're all in Washington is really pernicious, and especially because it's close to New York, that corridor. That's where too many decisions are made. There's too much money there. There's too much influence peddling. There's too much government. So I like the idea. I think it's a solution that's not political. It's just structural, and it really will help both parties.
Yeah. Victor, I said we were going to talk about ladies, but let's interject a man in here, because we were talking about agriculture, and that's your friend. And I would great admire myself of John Harris, who recently passed away. I think people in California who have gone to Coalinga and Harris Ranch might know of Harris, and that John is the Harris of Harris Ranch, a strong conservative, a supporter of National Review. Once upon a time when I was there and you were there, he was head of the Pacific Legal Foundation. He was chairman of that board. But he was a man who I think is an archetype, Victor, unknown to people like me from that New York area. He's one of the more recent pioneers of America who took this, with some others, took this barren area, would we call it that, and turned it into a very fertile area that's been feeding the world, and done many great things. Your thoughts about your friend?
He was a agribusiness baron, but he was not obsessed with money. His idea was to get into as many different fields and try to revolutionize them. During the COVID period, I knew John pretty well. During the COVID period, he refused that free money for employees, and the town of Huron, where most of his employees work from, Mexican-American employees for the most part in that community, he helped them stay employed, even though at his own expense, because the restaurant that he owned was shut down. And I think if you drive along I-5, you see Harris Ranch Restaurant and Hotel. I think at one point it was serving, I think it still was, fourth largest or fifth largest number of meals per day in California. And he really developed that along with his wife, Carol Harris, whom I knew a little better. She called me a lot about strategies that she thought would help conservative candidates. She would donate, and she would call just out of the blue and say, "Hey, Victor, there's this representative, they're approaching me, do you know him?" And I would do research and talk to her. But she was much more than that. And if you look at the industries that he went into meat packing, and the meat packing plant that he had is about 4 miles from my house, and then the feedlot was right on I-5. And he was the pioneer in how humanely cattle could be killed and not in a way that they suffered. He spent a lot of money doing that. It was the largest beef packing in the West Coast. If you went into a Safeway or a Ralph's and you saw a steak, it was one of the few that had a label brand name, Harris Beef, and you knew that it was going to be better than the alternative. He had that, as I said, right out in the middle of nowhere on I-5, he built this huge complex of a hotel and a restaurant with full facilities. They have chargers out there for EVs. They have everything. And it's kind of an oasis. It's kind of like the old idea of an oasis out on I-5. It's really the last big stop before you merge in with the 99. He did that, and then he farmed. I mean, he wasn't the biggest. He wasn't the 200,000 Boswell or Paradise Farms, but he probably farmed 18 to 20,000 acres. He was always known as a very honest person. When I would see, and a lot of people in my area work for him, and they would drive, so every once in a while I would be in a Harris. He gave me a bunch of caps. I had a Harris cap on once. A guy came into a Starbucks, a huge Harris truck, and he said, "Oh, you like John? Oh, I love John Harris. He's the most honest man in the world. He's so fair to." He was a wonderful man. Then he developed out on Trimmer Springs Road as one of the last stretches of the Kings River as it comes out of Kings National Park and Pine Flat Reservoir, Whitewater River. And on one side there was an Aboriginal forest. It's still there. And then over 30 years, he bought parcels and he created like a 7,000 acre corridor. And once some of it is farming, he has oranges. It looked like Tuscany. It was so beautiful. And then it belonged to the Giffen family, and they had a big home right on the river. It was one of the most beautiful areas in California. Picturesque. It reminded me of a Kentucky. You were there many times, Jack. A Kentucky Derby farm type thoroughbred horses, which was another one of it. He had the largest thoroughbred racing horse conglomerate, and you and I think, went out there and toured the stables, the track. It was all the trainers. It was all quite impressive.
California Chrome was his
California
horse.
Chrome was raised on his facilities. That won the Kentucky Derby. So he was a premier farmer. He was one of the big meat packers. He had an almond hulling facility. He was, as I said earlier, he had a lot of, I guess you would call it, environmental land along the Kings River. It's just stunning. And he was a great philanthropist. He gave to a lot of causes. He gave to politicians of both parties. He wasn't a strident partisan. He was foremost in trying to make sure the San Joaquin Valley got their federally contracted allotments of water as they started to be diverted. One thing that I don't know if people remember, he was very young when his father, who started this empire, actually it was his grandfather, but his father did and was a big farmer, and then his father was remarried, and he died suddenly of a heart attack, and John was only in his early 20s, and it was a little bit contested that his stepmother had a lot of property from the family, and he really, it was unsure whether a young man in his early 20s could assume that responsibility and then be in a probate struggle with his stepmother. And yet he did, and he did it very professionally, and he rebuilt the Harris empire himself, and he had a lot of help from his wife, Carol. She had exquisite artistic taste. She was a very savvy real estate investor, decorator. She passed away in November, earlier than John did. Anyway, they made a big imprint, not just on their wealth, but in the various innovative industries that they went into: hotels, restaurants, racehorses, meat packing, farming, etc. And they were all successful in what they did. And they had this brand, Harris. When you saw that Harris label, logo, whether it was on meat, whether it was on food, whether it was on horses, you name it, it was always a sign that they were professional, honest, and everybody respected the name.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. John and Carol were great friends, too, of Liberty. So
they had a lot of nice people that worked for them. I knew a lot of their employees. I still do. But just wonderful couple.
Well, we'll talk about another Harris in a second. Victor, one last item before we go to a quick break, and that is Kamala Harris. Last week, I saw clips of her, didn't watch Colbert, but I saw Gutfeld commenting on her appearance on Colbert, and she was talking about her forthcoming book. It might be out now by the time this show is out, 107 Days. And from what I saw, a couple of minutes, it was a cackle fest. It was confusing, I just don't see how this woman was 107 days away from possibly being president of the United States. But
well, she had a lot of money behind her.
That's true. That's true. But she also announced she is not going to be running for governor of California. Victor,
anybody who watched that,
Kamala?
Yeah, anybody who watched that interview can see why she's not going to run. The polls were not there for her. She's forgotten, as they said of Talleyrand, she's forgotten nothing and learned nothing. She still cackles. She gets into these word salads. She goes on tangents. I don't know if the cruel rumors are true that she drinks too much, but there's something there that I don't know quite what it is. But she can't stay on topic and can't be analytical. She said that she went into sort of, I guess, a depression. She didn't watch the news for a long time. It was too hurtful. And so she tuned out, and now she thinks the system is broken, so she doesn't want to participate in it. Believe me, if she was polling 60-40, she would want to participate in it. It gets back down to this whole, if you're going to be a seasoned politician, and take a Donald Trump, he is a seasoned politician, even though he didn't run for prior office in this sense. To build a building in New York, you have to not only have financial skills, real estate skills, building skills, but you have to know how to deal with suspect unions, suspect environmental groups, suspect neighborhood racial groups, suspect politicians, suspect regulators, inspectors. You have everything against you, and you learn certain skill sets. And if you're a politician like Senator Grassley from Iowa, or any of these lifetime, even Chuck Schumer or Elizabeth Warren, you have to have certain skills to survive. And some of them are the ones I don't like, and I don't like their idea, but I give them. She'd never went that route. She didn't run on her own for vice president. She was just stuck on the ticket because she was a black woman, in Joe Biden's word. She was appointed to the Senate. She, as a presidential candidate in 2020, won no delegate. So here she was running for president. They nullified the 14 million primary voters who had voted for Joe Biden. She herself had run for the office and never achieved a single delegate, and for obvious reasons had withdrawn in 2020 before the Iowa caucuses of the New Hampshire primary. She didn't even stand for it because she knew she was going to lose. She had been a city and county attorney, prosecutor for this county and city of San Francisco, but she was a creation of the Willie Brown, who was her paramour for years when she was in her 20s, and then the Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, Barbara Boxer, Jerry Brown machine that transferred political power from Southern California, where the population was, to Northern California, where the $9 trillion in new tech money was, and Napa money. And that was what she was. She's never really been out on her own and in the fires of politics and having to hammer out position papers and debate back. It was all canned. And so you live by that, you die by that.
Well, it was nice to see her and Colbert, two people
who lost their jobs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Together. Hey, Victor, when we come back from the break, we're going to get your take on two Wall Street Journal op-ed pieces, one by Peggy Noonan and the other by Kim Strassel, and we'll get to that after these important messages.
Where do you keep your birth certificate, passport, and social security card, and vehicle title? Do you know where to find your loan details or the deed to your property? Wouldn't it be nice to easily pull up all your usernames, passwords, and PINs and codes? A knockbox makes organizing your important documents simple. You'll feel great knowing where everything is, and that your next of kin will have no problems handling your estate down the road. Each knockbox comes with a comprehensive list that ensures you add everything they'll need to manage your estate when you're gone. From the plans for your beloved pets to the login details for credit cards and subscriptions. If you've got a household, you need a knockbox. Just head over to theknockbox.com and use promo code Victor16 to save 16% off. That's the knockbox.com, promo code Victor16 to save 16% off. Knockbox.com. Get organized and save. And thanks to Knockbox for sponsoring the Victor Davis Hanson Show.
We're back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show, recording on Sunday, the 3rd of August. This episode is up on Thursday, August 7th. Victor, let's start with Peggy Noonan, who's got a op-ed this past weekend titled "Stop the ICE Workplace Raids." Let me just read 2 sentences here quickly. The administration believes its toughness delivers a message. Don't come here illegally. And of course it would. But there are other ways to deliver it. Donald Trump's presence alone has delivered it, and the border is pretty much closed. In these raids, the administration is making a grave moral and political mistake. The American people want criminals, thugs, and abusers in the country illegally thrown out. Full stop. But workers who are living constructive lives, who are contributing, who help keep America up and operating each day, no. Victor, your thoughts on...
Well, I've discussed that, and I got a lot of criticism. And part of me agrees with what she's aiming at, but she's never explicit. So it's not, Peggy, just the 500,000 criminals that Donald Trump is rounding up. He's trying to round up the million-plus people who have already gone through the system. They're subject to deportation orders. Their cases have been adjudicated, and they scrammed. So he's got to find those. Number 3, Peggy, if you go to an apartment because there's a child molester or someone who's committed DUI and killed somebody, and you go into that apartment to arrest him, and there's a brother or cousin that you look to see if they're armed or you need ID, and they're here illegally, do you say to them, Peggy, well, I'm just after a criminal illegally, and the fact that you broke the law, I'm not interested in. So what she's basically saying is, without any detail, the fact that Donald Trump closed the borders by pressuring Mexico, promising to finish the wall, no more catch and release, no more refugee status, no more Joe Biden lying, that's enough. But we already had 20 million here illegally, and he let in another 12. So with 32 million people, I, Peggy Noonan, will decide it's cruel to deport somebody. Her philosophy seems to be, it was moral enough to let somebody come in and break the law, but it's amoral to send somebody back home and enforce the law. There can be an argument. It is not amnesty. Let me repeat this. It is not amnesty. If she is correct that there are sizable numbers of people who fit 4 or 5 criteria. 1, they are working. 2, they're not on any public assistance. 3, they have no record of criminal activity, and I mean DUI. 4, they have been here a sizable period of time. Not the Biden people, but 5, 6, 7 years. 6, they are willing to admit that they broke the law and willing to be paying a fine. Just like if you're speeding and you get caught and you pay a fine. So then they will be given a brief window to apply for a green card, everybody, not citizenship, not amnesty. And that green card will be reviewed every year to see if they, A, are on public assistance, or B, have committed a crime. I don't know how many of the pre-existing 20 million people that would affect, but I know this, that if you did that, it would take the wind out of people like Peggy Noonan, who go into a fit of crisis when people say, oh, I can't believe you said something nice about Donald Trump. He's rounding up everybody. Because all Trump would have to say is, well, we're rounding up people that didn't fit the criteria. I mean, do you want people in here who don't work on public assistance? You want them here that commit a crime? You want to hear them that just leaped over the border? You want people here who are not willing to pay for a $1,000 fine? Or you want people here who don't even take the trouble to apply for a green card when they could? So that would give them a good argument. But to tell you the truth, I don't think that would be I don't think it would be 10 million people who would qualify. I think it would be maybe 4 or 5 million. And then you could deport. It would be a good argument for deportation of the people who didn't qualify. And I think it might be something to consider. But when I mentioned that in abbreviated form. I got a lot of letters that were angry. Victor, you of all. I wrote Mexifornia 20 years ago. I outlined that then, that you could do that. But people don't read very carefully. I mean, there's a lot of checkoffs. You can't commit a crime, any crime that is, can't do that and stay here if you're illegal. You can't be on public assistance. You've got to be here for a long time and have a work record. You've got to be able and willing to say you broke the law and you are guilty of breaking the law and you're going to pay a fine. And you're not going to get citizenship. You're going to apply for a green card. And that shows you that we're going to audit you each year. And that's a lot of stuff that people won't do. And the other thing about Peggy Noonan is, I don't want to be ad hominem, but she has this bad tendency when there's an ascendant issue, and her sensory apparatus thinks that it's popular. Like when Donald Trump won in 2016, she wrote a series of, remember those op-eds about the people, and he was empathetic, and these are the people who belong somewhere. They're just not nowhere people. They're tied and they're rooted and they've been forgotten. And Donald Trump appealed. And then when Donald Trump, the Russian collusion and all that went after him, then he's screwed. The same thing about immigration. Well, this, what happened at Martha's Vineyard, and 10,000 people a day is out of hand, and Donald Trump did something. But man, these ICE demonstrations, everybody's angry. His polls went down to 53% support on immigration. I better write an op-ed. That's not a good thing to do. If you want to write you shouldn't care about public opinion, but if you're going to write an op-ed and you do care about public opinion, it's better to be on the wrong side of it, because that gives people something to think about, not just to pile on with this. And that's what she does. She adjudicates what's the majority position, and then she's very afraid that her positions might incur wrath or alienation or isolation from people that she feels it's essential to be on good terms with. And we know who those people are. That's the Washington, New York elite, cultural elite, literary elite, political elite, corporate elite. So she's a good writer and everything, but not that anybody cares about a guy from Selma, but I don't read her at all.
Well, two things, Victor. One was, I'm pretty sure about 2 or 3 months ago, we talked about some study that showed, I may be getting this wrong, but I think 1 out of every 7 kids in a public school in America today is somehow related to a family or part of a family of illegal immigrants. It may be very much the case in California, which maybe swamps a lot of the rest of the nation.
Yeah, 1 million people in Los Angeles are illegal.
So, it's not like there's not a societal, amongst many other societal costs, healthcare, et cetera, just from illegal immigration. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is our friend, Mark Krikorian with the Center for Immigration Studies, who of course is, adamant against illegal immigration, but also a great critic of the scope and scale and consequences of excessive legal immigration. So if we're going to be worried about let's let the vast majority that are here illegally stay because it's too icky to or have them arrested. There's no way we're going to come to a fuller, better general immigration policy.
We want people to be, if they're going to come, we want them to come legally. We want them to come in numbers that can be assimilated and integrated, and we're not doing that. We want them to be civically educated so they have some acquaintance with the American system, its history. I want them to know what the Battle of Gettysburg is. I want them to know who Abraham Lincoln is. Not that our own college students know that anymore. And I want them to understand the brutal bargain that they rejected their homeland for whatever reason, and they chose to come to our country, and they were guests when they came. And they don't criticize the country that they want to live in and romanticize by waving a Mexican flag in L.A. of the country they rejected while burning the flag of the country they under no circumstances want to leave. There's another problem, and that is the Democratic Party has given the wrong messages. So we have first and second generation immigrants, many of them citizens, and second. And they come over here, and I'm thinking of Mr. Zoran Mondami or Ilhan Omar was an immigrant. He's an immigrant. some of the members of the squad are first or second generation, and they immediately come over to this country from wretched places. Remember what Omar said? Oh, things were much better in Somalia, and they weren't as bad. I looked how dirty it was here, or we didn't have a dictator in Somalia. That's the wrong attitude for an immigrant. It's a wrong attitude to go into a soccer game in the Coliseum in L.A. and see the crowd rooting for the Mexican team, not the American team. So something's gone wrong with the whole thing, and it's because of numbers and no civic education and no legality. And I can tell you that the old immigrant communities, whether they were Japanese or Mexican, they were so patriotic and happy to be here and assimilated and integrated and intermarried. And this whole salad bowl tribalism is just fatal when you get massive numbers of unaudited immigrants from very impoverished places who come over here as economic refugees. I mentioned yesterday, I had to go into a local pharmacy, and I just said to myself, I have to get a simple prescription related to this sinus problem I've had. And I can tell you that there will be a line, and the amount of time that will take in line will be predicated on whether the person speaks English and is a citizen. And I can tell you that if you're not a citizen and you have Medi-Cal cards and various things and false identities, as many do, it's going to hold up the entire line. And it did. I was there for about 35 minutes. And each time a person came ahead of me that spoke English, was clearly a citizen, pulled out their card or their ID, or they had it in file, bam, 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 they were out. So a lot of things we don't talk about, is all of the impediments that massive illegal immigration imposes on a society. Fox News almost, if you read the New York Post or Fox News, all they do is just kind of chronicle what the other media will not. High-profile DUI wrecks where a illegal alien kills somebody drunk and leaves the scene of the accident. 50% of all wrecks in Los Angeles, the person leaves the scene of the accident. I have been in a wreck with my daughter, who was 12 at the time, of an illegal alien who ran a stop sign and broadsided me and flipped I was lucky in a pickup truck, and he ran, and I ran after him and detained him for the police. But the point is, the first thing he did is he ran. And I have said before in this program, I must have, in the last 50 years that I can remember, there has to be at least 6 to 7 incidents where somebody went airborne on the side of the road, drunk on a Sunday or Saturday afternoon, took out 6 rows of vines, maybe 3 vines per row, 20 or 30 vines, or tore out a young plum tree orchard, woke up drunk, left the scene of the accident. I called the police. Police came out, towed the car. I could not impound it. Tried one time. Police threatened to arrest me if I didn't break the chain. And there were no consequences. No one ever paid me. No one ever said, you've lost $20,000 worth of damage. This person's illegal. I've told the highway patrol, he's out there hiding in the vineyard. Oh, I don't know if you're right or not. I'm done. Everybody's done with that in California. They're tired of it, and because we have a Mexican-American minority population that is a majority of the minorities, most of these things are now happening not to the so-called Anglo community, but to the Mexican-American community. When you read the paper about an illegal alien running a stop sign in Fresno County and killing somebody, tragically, it's a Mexican-American driver who is the recipient of that illegality. And the same thing is true on violent assaults or all sorts of things. So the left is impervious to that, but that's why the Mexican-American community voted for Trump, or at least split down the middle, because they were the ones on the receiving end of liberal white piety. And the liberal whites who wanted open borders were not going to experience their ideology firsthand. It was going to be some poor guy in Madera or Sanger or Reedley that did it. And
Victor, I'm going to get to Kim Strassel, and I'm going to read now. Typically at the end of the show, we read listener comments. And I had one that's just so in line with something you just mentioned, and it has to do with the consequences of illegality in other ways in our society. So Trish Fitzpatrick, 2066, wrote this. She says, my surgeon husband is now retired after 5 decades of service. We like to travel, so the last 20 years were spent doing temporary work in many states and really enjoyed it. When we hit Houston and San Antonio, however, we were shocked to the core. Every form of healthcare was massively overused. The ERs looked like post-apocalyptic nightmare movies like Escape from New York. Mobs of non-English speaking people overwhelmed the space. Hubby's line of work was orthopedic surgery. Virtually every patient he treated was unable to tell him what problem they had. If they brought someone to translate, the translator only spoke enough to order from Chipotle. It would have been funny if the fallout hadn't been so tragic. Doctor to translator. Describe the problem. Translator turns to patient, and they speak for 10 minutes. Translator. She has pain. Doctor. She just said several hundred words. What were they? Translator shrugs. My husband said he finally knew what it was like to be a veterinarian. That is...
I can tell you,
system.
2 years I was walking in my orchard, never have happened. I've been stung every blossom, 10, 20 bees a year for this one reason. I don't know. I have a serum tryptase problem, but I went into full anaphylaxis. I woke up. There were 3 wonderful Mexican-American paramedics. They brought me right to the emergency room, and it was flooded with people that were obviously not documented. They did not speak English. Must have been 50 people there, and the nurses and the doctors were flooded, and they had every type of malady. And 15 years ago, I broke my arm. I went into the same emergency room. I was the only non-English speaker there, and I had a broken arm, so I couldn't fill out the thing. I said, "Can you fill out? I can tell you," because I'm right-handed, and I write right-handed, and the woman said, "No, we only do it for people who don't speak English." I was at Cal State Fresno for 21 years. I had a poor student that came in to me, and he says, "I live on the other side of the Nevada border. I have to pay 3 times the tuition to come to Cal State Fresno because I'm not an in-resident, and we have 3 or 4 people in your class that I know that are here illegally, and they get in-state tuition. So American citizen pays 3 times what an illegal alien from a different country pays." I said, "Well, I've complained about that. They say they pay sales tax, but 50% of Californians don't pay income tax, state income tax. 1% pays 50% of all tax revenue, 1% of the households. 5% pay about 65 to 70%. So when you go into these communities, there's also a mindset. It has nothing to do with your ethnic background, but if you go into a country and the first thing you do is break the law knowingly by crossing that border without permission, and the second thing you do is you stay there without permission, the third thing you're likely to do is to try to justify that with some fraudulent form of ID, then that policy changes. I can tell you, whether you like this sounds illiberal or not, I can tell you that if I go into a major shopping center in my area at 6 a.m, you should see the parking lot. It's just covered with trash and litter, and people come in. And these are not U.S. citizens that do it because they are inculcated with a different... When I see people, they always take their shopping cart and they put back. But people who just come across the border... maybe they're too impoverished, but their attitude is, "I haven't been acculturated to your customs and traditions, but I do know the ones that I came from. And so if I'm going to leave trash in yesterday I went in I had to go through 5 shopping carts, Jack, before I could find one that didn't have trash in it. And these are not the ones out in the park. These are the ones that they brought back in. They either had newspaper, bargains or tissues or hand wipes in the shopping cart. And every time, it's just everywhere when you're living there. And the people that I work with who are in Tony Palo Alto have no idea what it's like. And when they go to a doctor, they don't wait. They don't go from 15 minutes to 3 minutes. And so, as I said, I've gone to about 2 specialists, and it takes months in this area to get a doctor. And when you see them, it's like I've got to type on this, Victor, so we got to go really quickly. What did you have any of this? When's the last time you came in here? I can't remember. Okay. Got any problems? See ya. That's what it is. And it never used to be that way. Never used to be that way. So it affects people in hundreds of different ways. I just had a person that's connected to my family that was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and one of the complaints he had was he could not get into a specialist. And so let me just flip the question the other way, Gavin and Jerry Brown and Nancy Pelosi. What did you think was going to happen when over the last 25 years you let in 10 million people into California that were undocumented? Where were they going to live? Where were they going to get medical care? Where were they going to go to school? How was it going to affect other people? How were they going to drive when they didn't know anything about American traffic law? Where were they going to get and did any of that affect you? And the answer is no, it didn't affect you. Yeah. It affected other people, poor people, middle-class people. So that's why you did it. You felt good about it, but you never lived among the people you so-called championed. And that's the problem. It swarms a system. And
gated communities and concierge services.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a real disconnect.
I asked for a physical. I haven't had a physical in 2 years. I asked for one. I was told I was going to get one in May. Oh, sorry, June. Can't do that. July. Oh, it's now end of September. That's just a little physical. And they're swarmed. All of them are. And so you make a decision. And if you look in law enforcement, what do? When you pull over someone, you write a ticket? What if you write a ticket and the person is going to run, or he's never going to show up, or he's never going to pay? And what do? Do you tow the car? Then what do you do with the guy? You just leave him on the side of the road? There's just a myriad of problems happen when you flood the zone with people here illegally. And when you have a country like Mexico who deliberately exports people for the $63 billion in remittances they send home, then you've got a force multiplier of the effect. Mexico deliberately tries to destroy the border. Or what Mr. Obrador used to say, it's a beautiful thing that we sent 40 million people into the United States. That's what he said.
And Victor, to torture our listeners with a little more of my Bronx accent, Kim Strassel's piece in the most recent piece in the Journal, The Rise of the Climate Right. Here's what she wrote to begin her piece. Something important happened this week. If the fuming response is anything to go by, the country is witnessing the rise, finally, of a scientifically armed and debate-ready climate right. The consensus, gatekeepers, don't like it one bit. The Energy Department issued a report whose title might glaze eyes, a critical review of impacts of greenhouse gas emissions on the U.S. climate. The New York Times, foaming with indignation, rolled out every shame word to denounce the report's authors as skeptics who misrepresent and cherry-pick as they undermine and attack the consensus. This fury was at striking odds with the smug, we've won tone of recent climate journalism. Victor, there's a change afoot in the...
Yeah, there is. Chris Wright, the Department of Energy Secretary, Lee Zeldin, the EPA Director, and Doug Burgum, the Interior Secretary, they all caucus together, they coalesce together, they form policy, and the result of it is, I think Doug Burgum said we had somewhere between $1 to $200 trillion worth of assets that have been underutilized or not utilized, rare earth materials that were dependent on China, natural gas that we can burn effectively without pollution, and we're going to use it. And the result will be that the middle class will not be paying 40 cents a kilowatt for energy, while a bunch of people like John Kerry fly around on a private jet and lecture his so-called inferiors about their carbon footprint. Or Al Gore lives in a 5,000 square foot home with air conditioning, a pool, all that stuff, and then lectures. It's a class thing. And the biggest problem is, if you look at China, its use of carbon emissions, it's just escalating out of control, and more per capita, more than we are now, or Europe, and we're spending all of this money for this incremental decrease of. And you look at the world, you can't do anything without dealing with China. And China has said, nope, not going to do it. We're not going to do it. We'll export these crazy windmills and solar panels to you, but we need coal. And I mean coal, 2-3 plants a month. And so Europe destroys its economy, while China produces 2 new plants a month. And it's insane that we're doing this, especially because we redefine pollution not as toxicity, but as heat. So we can burn 99.9% natural gas without toxic fumes or residuals, and yet because it produces heat, it's somehow evil. Even nuclear power is evil, I suppose. They can't really, I guess hydroelectric is permissible, but as we saw with Gavin Newsom, he blew up 4 dams and took out 80,000 homes' source of electricity that was hydro. So they're incoherent, and people are sick of them. And because we live in California, and because these lunatics have been in control of our energy policy, what did they give us? They gave us 1/4 of all state residents cannot pay their Southern California Edison, but the predominant power company, PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, they cannot pay their power bills, or they won't pay, and they can't have their power cut off if they don't. So the result is that you've got to have the highest rates in the country, in part to subsidize 2 different phenomena, and they're related. Number one, renewable wind turbines, solar panel farms, very inefficient, must be subsidized, very costly per kilowatt, and too costly for kilowatt that 1/4 of the population won't pay their power bill or can't, and therefore the people who can have to subsidize it. That's what the left gave us. And now all of a sudden, when Kim talks about the climate right, she's saying, no mas, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to try something different. We're going to try to get clean burning natural gas, nuclear power, especially for the AI revolution coming. Everybody wants to go on their little laptop and go to Grok or something to do this. That takes a lot of energy, it turns out, and you need energy. And the reason we're going to do this is not because of you or me, Jack, or our listeners. We don't have influence. It's because the trillionaire people in Silicon Valley want to make money, and they know that AI is critical to their fortunes and to their countries, in a deathly rival race with the Chinese. And to do this, we need energy. And to do it, solar and wind don't cut it. So they're talking about smaller nuclear reactors, natural gas. They're thinking of anything. And they're very influential people, and they're very powerful, and they were on the left. So we'll see some big changes. We'll see some big changes. It just reminds everybody that Trump is waging, whether you like him or not, a multifaceted, multi-front cultural, political, economic, social, military revolution, political revolution. And it affects every aspect of our life, and that's why we have the hysteria. It's not just immigration. It's not just energy. It's not just the universities. It's the sources of the progressive power. It's the foundations. It's the way the universities indoctrinate people. It's PBS. It's NPR. It's the network news. It is the silk stocking law firm. So he's going after all of them, not going after them in a vengeful fashion, but making them follow the rule. And that's why he's not addressing the symptoms as he did in his first term. He's talking about the malady that makes the patient sick, not the boils on his forehead, but what causes those.
Yeah. Well, Victor, we're going to actually, I have a poll here I want to talk to you about. Shows maybe the indoctrination of our youth is waning, but I want to talk about that and Sydney Sweeney, the woman in the jeans, and we'll get your thoughts on these 2 topics as when we come back from these final important messages. If you want to drop extra pounds, boost energy levels, or reduce swelling in your legs and feet, then this message is for you. Pure Health Research is on a mission to make America healthy again. And 2 of their best-selling health supplements are leading the way. First is Liver Health Formula. Over 100 million Americans have a sluggish liver riddled with fatty deposits. This can kill your metabolism, pile on the pounds, and make you feel tired. Liver Health Formula takes care of all that. It supports thriving liver health with special nutrients like artichoke extract and milk thistle. This is one of the easiest ways to slim down and revitalize your energy levels. Next is lymph system support. If you struggle with fluid buildup or swelling in your legs, ankles, or feet, this is for you. This natural ingredient in lymph system support helps gently flush extra fluid and toxins out of your body. And right now, for a limited time, you can get 35% off Liver Health Formula and Lymph System Support, along with all 50-plus health supplements Pure Health Research has to offer. Head over to purehealthresearch.com and use the coupon code VICTOR at checkout. That's purehealthresearch.com with the coupon code VICTOR to save 35% on your order today. We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson show. I'm springing this on you, Victor, although I sent it along, but Blaze Media had a piece, this is about young adults shift dramatically to the right in 2 years. This is the headline. The Republican Party has enjoyed massive gains among young Americans over the span of about 21 months. This according to a Pew Research poll. According to the surveys of registered voters in August 2023, men and women in categories ranging from 18 years old all the way up to 49 years old favored Democrats. In fact, the only 2 categories that leaned Republican at that time were 50 to 64-year-old males. We don't qualify for that anymore. And over 65-year-old males, we do qualify for that. As of June 2025, however, young American adults have swung in the other direction en masse. This, Victor, despite, we're just talking about climate stuff, despite the relentless indoctrination these kids are getting from kindergarten on, their political positions are changing.
They don't want to be elected. James Carville has said few things that were correct, but one of the correct things he said is people are getting tired of lectured. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't drink this, you can't do that. Especially when you add in the force multiplying effect of hypocrisy. So it's a kind of a counter-revolution that's cultural. I guess these young men are saying, you know what? I go to college, I see these very attractive women, and they dress in a way that no one ever dressed in the 1950s, even 60s or 70s. Their midriffs are showing, their skin tight. This is fine. We all love it. We go to the beach, there's string bikinis. But I do know that if I get into a physical relationship with this person and mutually it falls apart, we just don't want to see each other, but one person is the predominant person wants to break it off, me, male, that person will have a complaint against me. And one of the complaints will be that I was sexually harassing or I sexually assault, and I don't want to get involved anymore. So there's all these articles now from feminists, men don't want to date. There are virgins that are 19. The men are low testosterone. No, they're not. They just know that that when they go out on a college campus or anywhere and they date a woman and they get involved with a woman and it doesn't work out, the person who feels aggrieved, and probably because of their caddish behavior. In the old days, we'd say, he's a cad. He was cruel. He's a player. Just forget about him. But today it becomes a criminal matter. So that's one thing. The other thing is they don't want to go to campus and see the president of Sac State say that he wants to destroy whiteness. They're sick of that. They work, they go there, they have $50,000 in student loans. They're not eligible for minority scholarships. They're working at Home Depot or, Olive Garden. They come to school, they take their units, they go back to work, and then they hear that the president says that they're privileged and he wants to destroy them, basically, because their whiteness in his mind. They're sick of that. They're sick of that. They see some guy who's a guy like them, and he's got suddenly long hair, and he's got huge shoulders and muscles, and suddenly he's winning the track and swimming, and they say to somebody, that guy's a male. and he shouldn't be anywhere near women. If I did that, and they said, oh, no, you're a liberal. You can't say that. And so, they drive up in their pickup and they say, oh, what do you get to the gallon to that? That's just a gas hog you're taking. And they say, well, I just, look at San Jose. It's full of thousands of San Jose airports, thousands of private Gulfstreams. Who are those people? So they're sick of being lectured to about race and gender and transgender and political correctness and New Green Deal. And they're sick of getting lectured from people who do not follow their own advocacies. It's like Barack Obama flying in and telling black males that they're fooled into voting for Donald Trump, and they need to do this and they need to do that, and then he flies back to Colorama or Martha's Vineyard or Hawaii, or he lectures us that we've only got 10 or 20 years before the oceans lap up over the shore, and then he buys 2 multi-million-dollar seaside estate. They're sick of it. That scold. They don't want to be scolded anymore. That young generation, they're just guys, and they want to be guys. And they're sick of being scolded for wanting to be guys, and they're sick of being lectured that they're low testosterone, feminized men, and where are the real men that opened the door and paid the tab and protected women in a bad neighborhood when you got out of the car. It's a lose-lose situation. So they're sick of it, and they're voting Donald Trump. And the same thing is true of males across. It's Hispanic males, it's black males, it's Asian males. They're losing the male vote, the left is. And that's why they gravitate to Donald Trump. Whatever they say about Donald Trump, he doesn't care. And every time he posts something that the left says is lunatic, or look at Rosie O'Donnell, she's a loser, or you know what I mean? Or that person has bad genes, or she's low IQ. They don't like it, but they say, you know what? He says what he means. Whatever you say about him, he's not scared to just say it. And if you don't like it, then criticize it. But we do not like people who know and feel certain things and they tell us the opposite.
Right.
And that's his appeal.
An age of inauthentic leaders.
He's authentic. It's coarse. It's bombastic, and you get what you see. And that's the source of his appeal. And they don't get it. They do not get it. They do not get why he's popular. One of the reasons he's popular, he didn't just destroy the number of Trumpers, he destroyed the Democratic Party. He put them into a state of madness, and they exposed who they are into the nth degree in their hatred of him. If he's for closed borders, Jack, and legal only, then we're for championing child molesting illegal aliens. That's what we're for. If he thinks only biological women should be in sports, then we're for the most masculine woman that we can find with testicles and testosterone. Whatever he is for, we're going to be 10 times more against. And that goes into lunacy. And that's what, like some addict that's fixated on that drug, they can't stop it. They know it's killing them, but they can't stop it. I don't know how they get
out of it, Victor. But speaking of people who are sick of things, allegedly sick, and I don't want to make heroes out of corporate America because Budweiser and the like target, but here's Charlie Gasparino, who writes for the New York Post, and many people who watch Fox Business News have seen him, and of course Charlie's from the Bronx, I have to give him that. Here's a piece he just wrote. Fool me once, corporate America is not falling for the left's outrage over Sweeney's Good Genes ad, a piece of what he wrote. That's why Sydney Sweeney, known more for her cleavage than her politics, has become a touchstone in our culture wars, and here's why the attacks won't work. Wokeness was once big in the business world, but notice my use of the past tense. Corporate America listened to these kooks for many reasons, including their own progressive management leanings, with disastrous results. They learned the hard way that most Americans of all races hate being proselytized with political dogma, particularly of the left-wing variety, that pushes the limits of identity and gender politics beyond cultural norms. Victor, this controversy, I don't know how controversial it is. I have a feeling American Outfitters or American Eagle, whatever the company is, their stock, they can't keep their jeans in stock because of all this. But
it's the same thing we were talking about. The male says, I don't care what you say. In fact, if you say I can't do that, I'll do the opposite. They're sick of it. Aristotle and the aesthetics and a lot of philosophers, they're very interested in this phenomenon of what is beauty. And is it natural or socially constructed? We're told it's socially. We had a jeans commercial, didn't we, with a very obese African-American woman. It wasn't that she was African, but she was very obese. And they thought that would, and we've seen elderly women and obese women in Sports Illustrated during the Me Too thing. Okay.
Or, so, plus size cover girls.
Basically the philosophers that were empirical and not theoretical, they wanted to know why certain types appeal to people. And if you read, for a woman, and I guess for men with larger rather than smaller shoulders appeal to women. Women who have a thin waist and a waspish figure, a larger rear end, thin waist, and ample buxom appeal to men. Whether it doesn't mean that you don't have different preferences and you can be too excessive here and you don't. That's just the way it is. And to the degree that you have a Twiggy in the old days or something, you can appeal to different tastes. But that is the standard, and it's imprinted our philosophers when we're born. And it has something to do with our instinctual idea that bigger hips probably are better for child rearing, and so we're hardwired to think if we marry a woman like that, we'll have more children, even though we won't want any in some cases. But that's what we're hardwired. So we're told not to do that. That's not fair, because in an egalitarian society, it's very rare to see a woman with ample, firm rear end, small waist, buxom, and normal or underweight. It's just. But that is what you're hardwired for, according to a philosophical aesthetic tradition. So you're not supposed to say that, because most people are not like that. So you're supposed to praise obesity or flat-chestedness or no rear. And the same thing is applicable to men, no doubt. Big gut, small shoulders, womanish frame. Okay. And this generation says, nope, I'm not going to play that game. I see her. She's blonde, that got nice hair. I didn't care if it was brown. If it was Beyonce right now and she was in the same thing, they'd be selling just as many. That if they it's the jeans and it's Beyonce, she's very beautiful. She's got a picturesque figure. She would be selling the same thing. And there wouldn't be a peep out of the African-American elite. But they put this woman on, and she's buxom, and she's curvy, and she's pretty, and she's not apologetic about it. And these guys like that. And women apparently who are buying the jeans, they want to feel that they're like her, and that people will like them in the way they like to look at her. And maybe they don't quite have the figure as she does, but when she puts on the magic jeans, people look. So maybe if they put on the magic jeans, they'll look at them too. That's the whole idea of advertising. And it's a free country, man. It's remember that thing in Heat, and when Robert De Niro says something that Val Kilmer's not going to go, they have to get out. They've done this horrendous deed, and he says to John Voight, who's kind of a fixer. John Voight goes, "Well, I got the plane to get you all out," and he says Val Kilmer's not going. And he said, "Oh, you're not going? You're not going? I got everything fixed. He's going to stay." And Robert De Niro says he's going to stay, and then Robert De Niro says, "Okay, bro, it's a free country. You can do what you want." And that's what it is. That's the attitude of this young generation. It's a free country. Try to stop me from looking at this jean poster. And I could care less about if you ask the average 18-year-old woman or man that is buying these jeans, and you said, in my NPR voice, there's a long tradition that you should be aware of before you buy these jeans of eugenicists. Eugenicists were racist white people. Now, I cannot tell you that they were progressive leftists of the Margaret Sanger Planned Parenthood or maybe Woodrow Wilson type, but nevertheless, they have a long, pernicious tradition of racism, and this is channeling it. So you should know that before you buy the jeans. That's what the left wants us to think. And the fact is, the left doesn't even know who Margaret Sanger's. They don't even know what her background was.
She launched the Negro Project.
She did. She thought it was. We've talked about her. It was.
She was
Judge
influential
Ginsburg.
in, yeah.
It was the forerunner of Judge Ginsburg. What's the problem? Aren't we deporting the right people?
Right.
That's what Judge.
She was very influential on Nazi Germany. I mean,
Oh, absolutely. They were big fans of Planned Parenthood, and the eugenicist movement came from the Anglo-speaking world in England and America. Although when the Germans got a hold of it, being Germans, they empowered it in all sorts of brutal ways. But nevertheless, this whole Sweeney ad is kind of funny. It makes the left more hysterical. I guess, is it Dylan Mulvaney, or was it Duncan or Dylan, the transgendered guy? That didn't work very well for Bud, and so now the corporations are thinking, would I rather be praised by the New York Times for my ad, or would I rather make $550,000 and get a bonus for getting a smash ad? I think I'll take the money and go with the people.
Yeah,
and
that's what they're doing. Yeah, Jaguar recently, they had that insane ad, and their sales went in the toilet.
How could somebody who made in the 50? My brother had bought a wrecked 150 sports car. We didn't have any money to fix it. I drove it, and once the wheel fell off at 70 miles an hour and rolled about a mile and almost killed about 5 people. Anyway, they make the 120, they make the 150, they make the Jag XKE. They have this reputation for muscular, brilliantly designed. The Anglosphere can finally make a car as pretty and powerful as the Italians can. And what do they do with that legacy? They put this crazy transgendered, whatever it is, postmodern, stupid commercials.
Yeah.
And they destroy their product's name. Yeah. And they say they're going to go all EV.
Good luck. It's a free country.
Where do they come from? They come from the university, everybody. That's where they come from. They get their MBAs. And the new dean at Stanford Law School is a sociology. Her background is in sociology. And she says in her website that she's committed to DEI. It's about a day late and $1 short, Dean. But that's what it is. The only good thing about these people is on the left, a lot of them some of them are hard ideologues, but a lot of them don't believe in anything. So if you tell them that Z or theirs or them or on the bottom of their email no longer gets you money or a promotion, they will drop that as quick as you can. I've noticed that, Jack. Have you?
Yeah. Where is it gone? Yeah. Where is she?
They've disappeared. My pronouns are. No. There are no pronouns now. Suddenly it's gone. I notice when I go fill out a medical form now, have you noticed that they don't ask for your pronoun? They used to.
I would have to go to the doctor to find that out.
Yeah.
Hey, as we close, I just want to say, you mentioned John Voight, and I had to deal with him last year on something. I like him a lot. But because I was watching Return, I just started watching Return to Lonesome Dove, which he's in. But I had not watched Lonesome Dove, which I just watched. When was that, 30 years ago? What? Yeah. It was terrific. You talked about it.
Yeah, that wasn't watched because that was an unauthorized. Larry McMurdy, I don't think, authorized that version.
But he returned to?
Yeah. Yes, he didn't. But it actually it was really good. They had, what's her name? The woman that was in Summertime that played the Jack Nicholson girlfriend, that actor. And Angelica Houston's character was Barbara Hershey.
Oh, replacing her. Yeah, right.
And she was more believable, I think. Maybe not as good an actress, but she was more believable. And then they had John Voight I thought he was really good in that. It was just
but it seemed a different type of PC-er than, and again, I just seen an hour of it,
they did a little bit
the
about
whole entire series.
The racist thing and the Mexican daughter of Robert Duvall character, Gus. Yeah. But what's his name was brilliant in that, Oliver Reed.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
As the cattle baron evil man.
Yeah.
The British brogue or whatever, that Irish brogue or whatever, Scottish brogue.
Scottish, yeah.
It was good. It was a good movie. I watched all of those movies.
Yeah. It's terrific. I'm glad you recommended it, man, because I can't believe I haven't seen this, and then I'm very glad.
I watched all of. There's a series, there was Dead Man's Walk and the prequel, sequel. They had a lot of different ones. They kind of went gaga, but the Lonesome Dove was just Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Duvall were on
Oh,
Match.
terrific. Yeah.
That was the best role I've ever
Duvall.
seen Tommy Lee Jones in.
Yeah.
And Robert Duvall, too.
Yeah, he's terrific.
John Voight is really, I like him a lot.
He's hardcore conservative. I had to deal with him on something related to Catholic University. He's a graduate of CUA.
I had dinner with him a couple of times when I was teaching at
really?
Yeah, I did at Pepperdine. I think I told you. I think I mentioned that he was very. I thought he was very humble, and we would talk about. And the guy that was he joined us a couple of times. The guy that was on Cliff on Cheers.
Yeah. He's my friend. Yeah, Cliff, John Ratzenberger.
He was very good. And then the guy that played Mingo, he came up to me and he said, at dinner once we were there, he said, "You don't know who I am." I said, "You're Mingo, and you played on Daniel Boone, and your name was Ed Ames. And you were part of a fantastic singing group in the early 60s called the Ames Brothers.
Yeah.
And your song was our title song at my senior prom called My Cup Runneth Over with Love." And he was just freaked out by that.
Really? He came on a National Review cruise. He's a real conservative.
He is. And he's
God rest his soul, I should say.
Yeah, he passed away at 90 or something. He was a really good guy. And John Voight, I think I mentioned in this broadcast, I went with my daughter who's passed away, and I was supposed to speak to this Beverly Hills group, and he was there, and he walked in and said hello, and he sat down in front of the speaker where I was speaking, and everybody, it's one of those big houses, but there's not enough room in every room, so there's adjoining rooms, and because there's about 60 people, and everybody wanted to sit next to him and be him, and Susanna was way in the adjoining room by herself. And he said, "Isn't that your daughter?" I said, "Yes, it is." He got up and took his food and went over and sat next to her.
Really? What a cool
He
dude.
did. He really did. He was. I really liked him, and he was just a good guy. I used to talk to him once in a while. And same thing with Dennis Miller. I talked to him a few times. I was on his show, and I liked Dennis Miller a lot.
I didn't know you had met. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Keep talking about Dennis.
No, he did, and. I think he called me or emailed me the first time he was going to go on Bill O'Reilly's, and he said, "Is there any tips?" I had all the wrong advice. I just said, "You got to be really careful that you don't, my advice to me is I don't get too carried away and sound extreme." "Oh, don't worry, Victor." So he went on there, and it was something to the effect, these socialists and these radical communists, and he was and of course I had given him exactly the wrong advice, because when he was so blunt and honest, and he just took off on there, and
he was terrific
when he was coming out overtly.
Yeah, did that once a week. Did you get into it with O'Reilly on a show once?
I did.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I did.
Well, we don't
no, I wrote a column for you, National Review. It was syndicated, in which I said the George Will spat that he had with Bill O'Reilly about the Reagan biography. When I think each of them regretted it. They started yelling at each other, and I just wrote a column and said, this is kind of. I was just writing about not them specifically, but cable news when people were shouting, and he called me and. Roger, they got very angry at me for that, and I didn't go back on Fox for a long time. But my point is this, that later, years later, he was very magnanimous. I like him. I go on his podcast maybe once every 2 or 3 months. He's been a perfect gentleman, been very nice. The first time I went on, I mentioned, "Are you sure you want me on?" And he said, no, just bygones, if he even remembered it. He's been, I like him a lot. And I know a lot of people think he's controversial, but he still has that skill. He's getting older, but we all are, but he has a very successful podcast. He was very friendly. I like going on there and talking to him. I have no ill will at all toward him.
Yeah. Well, we'll trade notes off screen or whatever we're on about John Ratzenberger, Cliff Clavin. He lived in Milford, and he was a friend. He's now gone out permanently on the West Coast, but I liked him. What a great guy. He's just so down to earth.
There's just certain people in Hollywood that you bump into once in a while. One of them was David Mamet, we've talked about. I really like him. He's really a brilliant guy. He's very witty, and he's forceful and transparent, and not full of himself.
I was published in an issue of NR a few years ago, and he was in it. And I found it kind of shocking, and I wrote him, and he wrote me back that I could be published in the same issue of a magazine that David Mamet was writing in was kind of was a great thrill, but a shocking thing. And he's really, I love his style of writing. He's a deep thinker, very deep thinker. So, yeah. Well, Victor, we're at the we're way over here.
Yes,
but at
we got to go.
We didn't crash. So I want to thank everyone. We have so many new listeners and viewers, and thanks for leaving comments. I read one of them earlier. I've tried to read them all. I want to thank the people who go to civilthoughts.com and sign up for my free weekly email newsletter, which is called Civil Thoughts, which gives you 14 recommended readings, great articles I've come across in the previous week. It's free, and we're not selling your name. So go to civilthoughts.com, sign up. It's produced by the Center for Civil Society, where I hang my hat part of the time. Victor, you've been terrific, always, ever. And thanks very much. Thanks, folks, for watching, listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody, for listening and viewing. I'll see you next time.